alive. Today is the 15th of January and I am reading Travels with My Aunt, a novel by Greene, published in 1969, and he has met his Aunt Augusta for the first time after 50 years at his mother's funeral. She's a traveller, his aunt, in her 70s, and they've been to Istanbul, and now they've gone to Boulogne because he wants to see his father's grave. And they did. And they met somebody there. It's so dark and dingy today. I need these. But this is chapter 18. I will come, Miss Patterson said, with frightened dignity. You must tell your aunt, however, she is your aunt, that she mustn't take offence at me. He has been dead a long time. It is unfair of her to be jealous of me, because I care so much still. I repeated the message to my aunt exactly, and she was astonished. Did she really believe me to be jealous? The only time I can remember being jealous was over Quran, and that experience taught me better. You know how little jealous I was even of Monsieur d'Ambreuse. You don't have to defend yourself to me, Aunt Augusta, I said. Defend myself? I certainly have not fallen as low as that. I'm trying to explain my feelings, that's all. The woman seemed to me totally inadequate to her grief. You can't pour a glass of wine into an after-dinner cup of coffee. She irritated me. To think that she was with your father when he died. Presumably there was a doctor too. He wouldn't have died if she had not been so feeble. I'm convinced of that. Your father had to be shaken into action. The trouble with Richard was his appearance. He was strikingly good looking. He never had to make an effort with women. And finally he was too lazy to struggle. If I had been with him, I would have seen that he was alive today. Today? He would not have been much older than Mr. Visconti. Be kind to her all the same, Aunt Augusta. I shall be as sweet as sugar, my aunt protested and promised. And that afternoon I could tell that she was really trying to hide her irritation at Miss Patterson's mannerism, of which there were many, besides a habit of repeating words. She had, for example, a twitch in her right foot. The first time it happened, I really thought that my Aunt Augusta had kicked her. And when she had been silent a little while and her mind wandered, her teeth began to click as though she were manipulating a pair of false dentures. We had tea in my aunt's room, for there was no proper lounge in this square miniature skyscraper, which sat between two identical others on the quay. You must forgive us, my aunt said. They have only Lipton's Indian. Oh, but I like Lipton's, Miss Patterson said, with one little lump. Did you come via Calais? My aunt asked, making polite conversation. We came that way yesterday. Or by the ferry? Oh no, Miss Patterson said. You see, I live here. I've always lived here. That is to say, since Richard died. She gave a scared glance at me and said, Mr. Pulling, I mean. Even during the war? My aunt asked with a touch of suspicion. She would have been glad, I think, to have found a chink in Miss Patterson's integrity, if only a small error of fact. It was a time of some privation, Miss Patterson said. Perhaps the bombardment seemed less terrible to me because I had my children to think of. Your children? My aunt exclaimed. Surely Richard... Oh, no, Miss Patterson said. I refer only to the children whom I taught. I taught English in the lycée. Didn't the Germans intern you? The people here were good to me. I was protected. The mayor provided me with an identity card. Miss Patterson's leg jumped. After the war, they even gave me a medal. A medal for teaching English? My aunt asked incredulously. And other things, Miss Patterson said. She leaned back in her chair and her teeth began to click. Her thoughts were far away. "Tell me about my father," I told her. "What brought him to Boulogne?" "He wanted to give me a holiday," Miss Patterson said. "He was worried about my health. He said I needed sea air." My aunt rattled her spoon and I feared for her patience. "Just a day trip, you know. We took the boat, like you, to Calais, for he wanted to show me where the burghers came from, and then we took a bus here to see the Napoleon column. He had just read his biography by Sir Walter Scott, and we found there was no boat back from Boulogne." "That came as a surprise to him, I suppose?" my aunt asked with an irony which was obvious to me, but not to Miss Patterson. "Yes," Miss Patterson said. "He was very apologetic for his lack of forethought. However, we found 2 clean rooms in a little inn up in the high town in the square by the mairie." "Adjoining rooms, I assume," my aunt said. I couldn't understand why she was so severe. "Yes," Miss Patterson said, "because I was frightened." "Of what?" I had never been abroad before, nor had Mr. Pulling. I had to translate for both of us. "You knew French?" "I had taken a course at the Berlitz." "You mustn't mind our interest, Miss Patterson," I said. "You see, I have never heard any details of my father's death. My mother never spoke of it. She always shut me up when I asked questions. She told me he had died on a business trip, and somehow I always assumed that he had died at Wolverhampton. He often went to Wolverhampton." "When did you meet my brother-in-law?" Aunt Augusta asked. "May I pour you another cup of tea?" "Yes, please. A little weaker. I would not be a trouble to you. We met on the top of a 49 bus." My aunt paused with a lump of sugar in mid-air. "A 49 bus," she repeated. "Yes, you see, I'd heard him ask for his ticket, and when his destination came he was fast asleep, so I woke him up. But it was too late. It was a request stop. He was very grateful and came all the way to Chelsea Town Hall with me. I had a basement room then in Oakley Street, and he walked back to the house with me. I remember it all so clearly." "So clearly," Miss Patterson said, "as though it were only yesterday. We found many things in common." Her foot gave a kick again. "That surprises me," my aunt said. "Oh, how we talked that day." "What about?" "Mainly I think about Sir Walter Scott. I knew Marmion and little else, but he knew everything that Sir Walter had ever written. He could quote. He had a wonderful memory for poetry." She whispered as though to herself, "Where shall the traitor rest? He, the deceiver. Who could win maiden's breast, ruin and leave her in the last battle?" "And so it all began," my aunt interrupted in a tone of impatience. "And the traitor rests in Boulogne." Miss Patterson coiled up in her chair and kicked her foot vigorously. "Nothing began in the way you mean," she said. "In the night I heard him knock on the door and call Dolly." "Dolly?" my aunt repeated with distaste, as though Dolly were an unmentionable word. "Yes, that was what he called me. My name is Dorothy." "You had locked your door, of course." "I had done no such thing. He was a man I trusted absolutely. I told him to come in. I knew he wouldn't have woken me for any trivial reason." "Certainly I would not describe his reason as trivial," my aunt said. "Go on." But Miss Patterson was far away again, and her teeth clicked and clicked. She was gazing at something we could not see, and there were the beginnings of tears in her eyes. I put my hand on her arm and said, "Miss Patterson, don't talk about it any more if it hurts you." I was angry with my aunt. Her face looked as hard as a face stamped on a coin. Miss Patterson looked at me, and I could watch her beginning to return from that long time ago. He came in," she said, "and he whispered, 'Dolly, my darling,' and he fell down on the floor. I got down beside him and put his poor head in my lap, and he never spoke again. I never knew why he came or what he meant to say to me." "I can guess," Aunt Augusta said. Again Again Miss Patterson coiled herself back in her chair and struck back. It was a sad sight to see those two old women at loggerheads over something that had happened so many years ago. "I hope you are right," Miss Patterson said. "I know well what you are thinking, and I hope you're right. I would have done anything that he had asked me without hesitation or regret, and I have never loved another man." "You didn't have the time to love him, it seems," my aunt said. "There you are quite wrong. Perhaps because you don't know what love is. I loved him from the moment he got off the bus at Chelsea Town Hall. And I love him today. When he was dead, I did everything for him, everything. There was no one else to help my poor dear. His wife wouldn't come. There had to be a post-mortem, and she wrote to the authorities to bury him in Boulogne. She didn't want his poor mutilated body, so there was only myself and the concierge." "You have certainly been very constant," my aunt said, but the remark did not sound like a compliment. "No one else has ever again used that name he called me. Dolly," Miss Patterson said. "But in the war, where I had to use an alias, I let them call me Poupée." "Why on earth did you have an alias?" "They were troubled times," Miss Patterson said, and she began to look for her gloves. I resented the way my aunt had behaved to Miss Patterson, and a slow flame of anger still burned in me when we went out to dinner for the second and last time in the deserted station. The gay, wave-worn fishing boats lay against the jetty, each with a painted pious phrase across the bridge: "Dieu bénit la famille," and "Dieu a bien fait," and I wondered what comfort the mottos brought in a strong Channel gale. There was the same smell of oil and fish. The same train from Lyon was awaited by no one, and in the restaurant there was the same disgruntled Englishman, with the same companion and the same dog. He made the restaurant seem all the emptier with his presence, as though there had never been a different customer. My aunt said, "You're very silent, Henry." "I have a lot to think about," I said. "You were quite taken by that miserable little woman," Aunt Augusta accused me. "I was touched to meet someone who loved my father." "A lot of women loved him. I mean a woman who really loved him." "That little sentimental creature, she doesn't know what love is." "Do you?" I asked, letting my anger out. "I think I've had rather more experience of it than you," Aunt Augusta replied with calm and careful cruelty. It was true. I hadn't even answered Miss Keane's last letter. My aunt sat opposite me over her sole with an air of perfect satisfaction. She ate the shrimps that went with it one by one before she tackled the sole. She enjoyed the separate taste, and she was in no hurry. Perhaps she did have reason to despise Miss Patterson. I thought of Couran and Monsieur d'Ambreuse and Mr. Visconti. They lived in my imagination as though she had actually created them. Even poor Uncle Joe, struggling towards the lavatory. She was one of the life-givers. Even Miss Patterson had come to life, stung by the cruelty of her question. Perhaps if she ever talked about me to another, I could well imagine what a story she would make out of my dahlias and my silly tenderness for Thule, and the stainless past. Even I would come to some sort of life, and the character she drew, I felt sure, would be much more vivid than the real I. It was useless to complain of her cruelty. I had once read in a book on Charles Dickens that an author must not be attached to his characters. He must treat them without mercy. In the act of creation, there is always, it seems, an awful selfishness. So Dickens' wife and mistress had to suffer so that Dickens could make his novel and his fortune. At least the bank manager's money is not so tainted by egotism. Mine was not a destructive profession. A bank manager doesn't leave a trail of martyr behind him. Where was Couran now? Did even Wordsworth still survive? Have I ever told you, my aunt asked, of a man called Charles Potiphar? In his way, he clung to a dead man as fervently as your Miss Patterson. But in his case, the dead man was himself. Not tonight, Aunt Augusta, I pleaded. My father's death is enough of a story for one day. And she told it reasonably well, my aunt admitted, though I think that given her opportunity, I would have told it a great deal better. But I warn you, you will be sorry one day that you refused to let me tell you the story I proposed. What story? I asked, thinking of my father. The story of Charles Potiphar, of course, my aunt said. Another time, Aunt Augusta. You are wrong to be so confident in the existence of another time, my aunt replied, and called for the bill so loudly that the dog barked at her from the bar. So that was the end of chapter 18, and I shall read chapter 19 soon.